And blessed to be a part of your day. Do want to thank so many people that showed up at Dave & Buster's on Saturday for our 50 for 50 event. Over $1,000 raised for the Boise Rescue Mission, over 1,000 pounds of food. It was an incredible event. Do appreciate everybody listening at KIDO Talk Radio. It was just a fun time celebrating my 50 years on God's green earth, but more importantly, it was so important to continue to raise awareness and help our friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. Of course, our thanks to Reverend Bill Roscoe and the man that put it all together, our great friend Tea Party Bob from the Gem State Patriot. And, again, Dave & Buster's for hosting the event. It was a wonderful time. And we'll have photos and video for you coming up. Joining us now, our great friend Michael Stumo joining us to talk a little bit about the trade deficit and how it impacts us. Michael, good morning.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Boy, we take a look at the deficit. Is that what the early explanation of what happened to the markets?
Yeah, well, I think the markets are reacting to the fact that the U.S. Treasury bond sales are going to be going up quite a bit, number one, and that drives interest rates up a little bit. But also the trade deficit, so the interest rates made the stock market skittish from the more Treasury bond sales from the U.S. debt. But also for the trade deficit itself, we've been using too much debt-fueled consumption, selling debt. But with the trade deficit, it means that we're not producing so much of our consumer demand is buying overseas goods, not U.S. goods. So we don't have the real economy flourishing like it could if we had a trade surplus and produced not only enough for our own country, but lived off export demand as well. So the trade deficit's got to be fixed to put a real economy base under our stock market.
Well, what would be the steps to do that? People are complaining about the billions of dollars of hole the latest deal shot through the deficit and saying that, we could be up to $2 trillion when it comes to our overall debt.
Yeah, that's right. And for 40 years, if we have been in a trade deficit, which means that other countries on net are living more off of our consumers than we're living off of their consumers. Too much of our consumer demand leaks to China to buy their goods or Mexico to buy their goods rather than the U.S. And if you get more growth in our factories, our cattle ranches, and in our employment, people pay more taxes, and then we don't have so much fiscal debt, and we have a lot higher wages and more income tax, and that's how other countries solve things. But we just issue more debt.
Well, this has been a challenge for every administration for quite some time. What's the solution? What's the medicine?
The medicine we've come to believe is that we've got to get our dollar price down. The strong dollar fetish that other administrations have had makes our goods and services we calculate about 20% too expensive for overseas buyers. So actually there's a 2-year lag with a strong dollar. For example, the 2015 strong dollar made a 2017 trade deficit increase. So let's say the Trump administration decides, as it hasn't yet, that we need a fair dollar price, and you can calculate this, a trade balancing equilibrium price for the dollar, and move it gently down for a couple of years, or move it gently down. Let's see, we get to that proper dollar price now. In about 2 years, all Idaho cattle and beef sales, your manufactured goods and the like will be reflecting it. We'll have a less of a trade deficit. We'll get to balance, and then we can recover our economy over the long term. So really, it's a long way of saying address the dollar price. You get more employment here. You fix the trade deficit, and then we can start fixing our debt problems.
What's the consequences if we don't?
We continue living off credit card debt, Treasury bond debt, it's mortgage debt. It's debt-fueled consumption as opposed to production and wage-fueled consumption that trade surplus countries like China, Japan, and Germany use.
Our great friend Michael Stumo joining us here at KIDO Talk Radio. So, the president likes to broker deals. Do you think that this will happen?
Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin did say in Davos 3 weeks ago that a weaker dollar helps our exports. Larry Summers, past Treasury Secretary, freaked out saying we've got to have a strong dollar. I'm not sure yet. We're actually working hard here at the Coalition for a Prosperous America to show Congress that we have to address the dollar overvaluation that is making all of our goods and services 20% too expensive and all the imports 20% too cheap, regardless of how good our factories and farms are. And they're starting to come around, but it's a longer-term battle. We're hoping to have some legislation introduced later this year to start that debate more fervently.
Again, we always seem to kick the can down the road. What does it mean for folks in Idaho if there isn't a deal to take on this debt?
Just have to get better at what you do. I guess it means that we're going to have more imports of beef that are displacing Idaho beef in our market. We're a net importer of beef. We'll be a net importer of manufactured goods, which means we don't have the jobs we could otherwise have. And so we just have to make do. We have to push our congressmen to get away from this free trade mythology. Free trade doesn't exist, and get into a strategic trade mentality where we conduct trade policy and dollar policy strategically to grow our country.
Seems odd that they can import beef from another country, and it's cheaper than beef grown right here in America.
Yes, it is. And with with the dollar 20% too high, our beef is 20% too expensive. Mexican beef is 20% cheaper. And, we don't produce enough beef to feed our country. We're leaking demand overseas. Our consumer demand for beef goes on net to foreign supplies, and that's really hurting our cattle ranchers.
Indeed, right here in the state of Idaho. And it goes the same for agriculture?
It does. We're a net exporter of corn and wheat and soybeans because we produce more than we consume, but there's increasing competition from, of course, Ukraine, Australia, Brazil, Argentina, and the like. And again, we're outpriced in the market in many instances because of our strong dollar, export tariff and import subsidy, which makes our corn and soybeans, wheat, 20% too expensive in global markets because of the dollar price. So we've got to focus on that. We do, Trump's work on trade enforcement and fixing solar panel trade cheating and clothes washer trade cheating is really good. You've got to do it. But for economy-wide work, you've got to look at the dollar price.
Michael, one more time, if people want to get a hold of you and get more information, what can they do?
Go to prosperousamerica.org. That's our website.
Michael, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right. Michael Stumo joining us here. Kevin Miller in the morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Our phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. This coming out of the state of California one more time. The Sacramento City Unified School District, boy, that's a mouthful, is attempting a project submitted by a high school student which attempted to correlate low IQ to certain racial groups. That went over really well. Sacramento City Unified School District Superintendent Jorge Aguilar says the use of racial language is not tolerated anywhere within the school district, and he's got an issue with that. We'll hear from him in a minute here. Also, I do want to remind you here at KIDO Talk Radio, lots of great articles at KIDOTalkRadio.com if you'd like to check those out. And, of course, the KIDO Talk Radio app. You just go to the App Store, you go to the Android store, and you can check that out today. And, you can download us and take us anywhere, anytime. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just have to sit back and take a look at it. And so we will get that sound for you coming up. And, it's a Monday when all of a sudden nothing works. All right, we'll move on from that. So here we have the situation in California where people are upset because of racist or racial language being used. And you're thinking to yourself, well, if that's the case, why was this allowed to go forward? And whether it's the teacher that has an issue with military, whether it's this school project that has run amok, you have to think to yourself, who's watching the store, right? Who's really watching the store in states like California, where high taxes go to fund a lot of things that, again, are driving the state to fiscal ruin because of politically correct agendas? It is just simply amazing to me that we have this. Now, let's see if we have the sound here. Let's try it now.
I want to make one point very clear as we continue our investigation. The use of racially offensive language in our schools by anyone does not reflect our values as a school district and will not be tolerated.
Well, again, the teacher there in the classroom should have put an end to it. But it shows you just how race itself, although a topic that the mainstream media likes to talk about, is such a distraction. I'm sure kids in California, as are kids in Idaho, they would like to focus on a lot of things congruent to getting them into a better school, getting them into a better grade, right? That's the crazy part about this. By the way, much more on our California updates. The Trump administration is continuing its efforts to undo more national monuments and land conservation efforts, now saying that they'll allow mining in over 1 million acres of California desert. Uh-oh.
Areas around Joshua Tree and Death Valley that have been part of a conservation desert plan are being opened up to new mining activities. In December, the president signed an order saying we can't rely on foreign competitors like Russia and China for minerals, many of which are used in our technologies. But John Shepard at the Sonoran Institute, which works on land use issues, says mining is not the best economic use of the land.
They're looking in the rearview mirror, looking at sort of the past economies of the West when, logging and grazing and mining was the foundation of the West's economy.
He says preserved open space attracts recreational visitors and new businesses that want to start up in areas with clean air and water. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
All right, Jessica, let's get down to it. Should we go back to the way the West was? And that is mining, logging, and other things that allowed people to have a great living wage. Instead of it, the rest of the country jokes about it, but the spotted owl wiped out the timber industry. Remember on, the History Channel, they had the X-Men, and no, not to be confused with Charles Xavier and Marvel Comics, but they were these guys that chopped down trees, and they loved it, and logging was good and big, and then all of a sudden, boom. And it really, for most of us here in the Treasure Valley, we're not really impacted by farming. Sure, we see the farms, we see the cows, we see the sugar beets and the potatoes every time of year. We love it when the tractors are on the roads. But farming is such a vital backbone, not only to the United States of America, but to our state. And the idea that we're going to restrict people from cutting down trees, from grazing, from all the things that made the West and the country what it was, is ridiculous. I love that comment. Well, we need to go back to how the West was. So at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, it's not fire season yet. It's just around the corner. Would you want some type of controlled cropping of the trees and such? Allowing people to go in and harvest the land? Or do we see it is what it is, where we have fires every time of year? And the BLM doesn't. I mean, who does a better job, in your opinion? The farmers and the ranchers and the people that are invested in the land, or the BLM folks? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, honoring American heroes. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Much has been said that the military needs the money, and I believe in a strong national defense. In fact, I believe that our national defense is actually the most important thing that the federal government does. It's one of those things that the state government can't do. And so, yes, I want a strong national defense. But you have to ask yourself whether a $20 trillion debt makes us a stronger country or a weaker country. I think it was Admiral Milliken who said that the number one threat currently to our country is our national debt. There is this question of whether or not an insolvent nation can be a strong nation. So as we look through this, I think it'd be wise that we would look at this spending bill and say, this is not the way we should run our government. And we as Republicans, if we really truly are conservative, we should be putting forward something that's looking towards balance at the very least, instead of going in the opposite way.
There you have it, Rand Paul, on the latest budget deal. By the way, not often reported, but it should be, that you had the budget deal included planning full funding for Planned Parenthood. Thank you very much, President Trump. And thank you very much, House and Senate Republicans, for funding Planned Parenthood. Despite promising to defund Planned Parenthood, President Trump signed a budget deal Friday, which passed by the Republican-led Congress, that fully funds the nation's largest abortion providers. Now, you remember, in a letter to pro-lifers during the election, Trump and Pence said, "I am committed to defunding Planned Parenthood as long as they continue to perform abortions and reallocating their funding to community health centers that provide comprehensive health care for women." Sad day there for the Trump administration. By the way, that's from our friends at For America. And we'll be talking to our friend David Bozell as we move along. Kevin Miller with you here. Our phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO, asking the question, when we're thinking of the issue involving this story out of California, they're mad that mining is going to be allowed to happen in the desert. Why not go back to the way the West used to be, where timber and mining were allowed to happen? If you missed that story, we're going to share it with you in a minute. But first, it is 6:25 at KIDO Talk Radio. Time for travel.
Areas around Joshua Tree and Death Valley that have been part of a conservation desert plan are being opened up to new mining activities. In December, the president signed an order saying we can't rely on foreign competitors like Russia and China for minerals, many of which are used in our technologies. But John Shepard at the Sonoran Institute, which works on land use issues, says mining is not the best economic use of the land.
They're looking in the rearview mirror, looking at sort of the past economies of the West when, logging and grazing and mining was the foundation of the West's economy.
He says preserved open space.
There we have it, logging, grazing, and mining. Now, you and to our friend John, by the way, thank you, John in Weiser. We will get that shovel to the White House. Thank you once again for bringing your piano that was handmade to our 50 for 50 event. We sure appreciate it. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to play that song. I wish I would have known. We would have had everybody sing your song. But, I'm sitting here talking to John, and he's going, Kevin, I'm a farmer. I'm up when you're up, and I don't go to bed till, sometimes after Lars Larson. And by the way, that would be from, 5 a.m. till about 9, 10 o'clock at night. And these folks are the backbone of our society. So what's wrong with grazing, logging, mining that made America what it was, that gave us big jobs here in the Gem State? And I love this. Well, no, people want to come to the West for quality of life. Yes, I totally get that. But those of you that were here during the glory days of timber, can you tell me that our standard of living is better now? Our standard of living is better when the fires come in? Our standard of living is when we're wondering about people losing their homes to fire and other sorts of things? It just doesn't make sense. And it really comes down to, the idea. And look, it is a big question. Do you trust the private sector, which we see a lot of big money folks from Texas and other states coming in and buying the land here in Idaho? And it's something that hasn't been addressed by the state legislature, where you have people that have had, winter homes, summer homes around the McCall area, Donley and other places that are now being landlocked because you have people that have bought the property and won't let these other folks in because they control the access roads and they don't want anybody on their land. Now, are they here? Are they living in the state? No. I don't know if they're having it just making this one big giant nature preserve, or they just want a bunch of land, or they know something that we don't. But, where is the state legislature on a lot of things? And we have this big gubernatorial race. Has anybody really talked about jobs? With all due respect, we hear the sound bites and everything else with these forums and everything else. But where do people have the plans? I mean, is there a specific plan to bring back timber? Can we take on the federal government and say, no, we want to bring back timber? Right? Real life, real issues. But then again, it's easy for a lot of us to say that we're not in the arena running for that office. More coming up next. Coming up, we'll honor some American heroes and once again support our blue. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning. The White House is defending their decision to block the release of the memo drafted by Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. Critics say the decision is partisan politics. The White House claims they aren't releasing it based on the advice of legal and national security experts. Representative Adam Schiff, ranking member on the House Intel Committee, says President Trump simply doesn't want the public to see, quote, underlying facts. Democrats drafted their memo as a rebuttal to the Republican memo, which accused the FBI and Department of Justice of misusing their surveillance authority when they got a FISA warrant on former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. In Washington, I'm Ellison Barber, Fox News.
And Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. So we have the latest on the memo.
The hypocrisy of this just kind of reaches out and grabs you by the throat. Here the Republicans write a memo which the FBI quite accurately describes as misleading and omitting material facts. The Department of Justice says it would be extraordinarily reckless to release this. And what does the president do? He says, I'm going to release it.
And there we have it, Adam Schiff with his take on this. Of course, they're not going to release the Democratic talking points, and nobody wants to. It's just crazy when we think of this. All this does is just confuse the average ordinary voter that just wants to go home, have a good life, watch their kids grow up, and just be done with it. The churn is just insane. Well, in Westerville, Ohio, 2 Ohio police officers were slain in the line of duty over the weekend. The community of Westerville, which, by the way, is just outside of Columbus, is paying its respects. Vice Mayor Kathy Kukuzi said she's inspired by how many people turned out to the vigil to honor the slain officers.
This is the Westerville I know and love, the people who come out because we are all family. Well, we lost 2 members of our family, the family of the city, the family of the police department.
You know, we've had issues here in the state of Idaho, and not issues. We've had tragedies where officers have been shot and officers have been killed in the line of duty. And we have an issue now before the Idaho legislature concerning stand your ground and concerning the Castle Doctrine, concerning everything else. And you have a lot of good folks that are pushing this legislation. And before we get into that, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, we think about the world that we live in today. And in your opinion, has it gotten more dangerous or has it gotten safer? And when I hear of officers who are on duty just doing their jobs, getting shot and killed, and not in a high crime area, Westerville, Ohio isn't, one has to wonder, is it time to take matters into our own hands? You know, when we have this shooter in Las Vegas, when we have other things going on, you just have to wonder, are we going back to the days where you yourself are accountable for your own safety? And one thing that does concern me lately is the mix of 2 things. And maybe you can correct me here at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. But whether we want to say it's the amount of people coming into the Treasure Valley or it's just a lack of sensitivity on the parts of people, the aggressive driving that is going on. You know, whether it's on 84 or Chinden or on the boulevard, everybody is in a hurry. Now, last night I'm on my way home from church, and there on, Highway 44, somebody's tailgating. Well, if you go through the city of Star, as through most cities, there's a speed limit. And our friends, the 80 county sheriffs, the Star Police Department, vigorously enforce that. And I'm thinking to myself, what person in their right mind would tailgate someone that's going the speed limit? And we see it on the highways, and we see it everywhere else. And we've seen it where people get out of their cars and there's angry confrontations. Maybe if you've lived in California, you know what I'm talking about. But when I always think of road rage, and look, sometimes I'm tempted to get out of my car and go blippity blip blip blip. I go back to a story that was covered by the Washington Post. It was covered nationally. It was one of my first forays in the national media spotlight, was when we went out to Los Angeles to do the show from Los Angeles. Lisa Gibbons, you remember her. She had a big talk show, and she invited me out there to cover this case of Shirley Henson killing Gina Foster. In fact, I was on the Big Man Show, Rush's show, on this. And, you know, Rush asked me about this, and basically what it was is you had 2 suburban moms. It was the first incident of woman-on-woman road rage and offered in a killing that happened. And you had Shirley Henson was being tailgated by Gina Foster. And as what often happens on the road to all of us, whether we speed up or slow down, there's always that thing called a stop at light or a stop sign. So Gina Foster gets out, goes to the SUV of Shirley Henson, pounds on the window, and Shirley, who had a phone next to her, grabs her gun, puts down her window, and kills her. And I thought to myself, after covering that story and interviewing the lawyers and everything else, I swore I would never get out of my car or do anything to escalate road rage. That's what happens. And when you have people with firearms, that's what happens. Shirley Henson made a bad call. She said she was in fear for her life. Well, then why did she roll down her window? And she was going to get a plea from the Shelby County attorneys and instead got 12 years in jail because she wanted to fight it. And you'd think a state like Alabama, a state like Idaho, people love guns, they would understand it. Not when you have a cell phone there. And remember, cell phones weren't as prevalent as they are today. And so when I think of things, I believe that we are getting in a more dangerous world. I believe that's why we should have public events to support the men and women of law enforcement. Because they're the ones that handle the jerks, the creeps, the thugs. Not us. We get to call them and they take care of us. But again, I'm looking at this and this just aggressive driving, and you think to yourself, and I hope and pray that it doesn't happen here in Idaho where we have a shootout. In fact, what was it, a couple years ago, maybe it was last year, where we had a road rage shootout between two young people, two young men. And it's just crazy when you think of, A, why escalate things, and B, the idea of, tailgating mixed in with guns. It's crazy. Cindy in Caldwell joining us now at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Kevin. I'm glad you acknowledged John, who played the piano and also the trumpet. So we had so fun with him on Saturday. He's an honorable, delightful man, and it just did my heart good to see all the men in that room, ladies too, but especially those that just seem so honorable and filled with integrity. I'm sorry our president didn't seem to lack that with signing that bill on Friday. But you know what? Before I just say something I need to about gangs in this area, I will say one thing, Kevin. I didn't. The Royal Labrador team, the first thing they did was to put together a pro-life coalition. And when I was asking people around the state of Idaho, would they like to come on board on each and every county? Because guess what? That is why I'm on that team, because he put life first. And really, to ask people if they'd like to come along and to give him his voting record, you speak life into this area. And I'm saying there's a list out there of every single person that in every single area can be sent information and you can go to if you're pro-life, as opposed to people speaking death into this area. And, yesterday I was on the phone with a police dispatcher, because sickening to me, and I'm just so done with this idea of we can't, in this kumbaya and even in the paper about, it's not sometimes everybody get along. Jonathan Gilliam wrote a book, Sheep No More. Well, I am not. I was just sickened. I'm coming home from church, going over the railroad tracks, and I look once again. So everybody can go to a computer and pull up these gangs tagging. It's called tagging. They actually let a rival gang, hey, you want to know what? This is our territory now. So we've got the red X4 over everything on the power companies, this, that, and the other thing. And when you look up their history, they can all, as far as I'm concerned, go back to California. I'm not picking on Mexicans. I am not profiling. I'm just saying facts.
Do you believe we're living in a more dangerous world?
100%. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, because if you look at their history and what they're into, what is the initiation into these gangs? I try murder. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And we've had car thefts, cars broken into, there's burglary, there's murder, there's everything else getting involved in those. So are they flamed up and back, the red belts? Yeah, because they tag in red. They're really not. They actually want you to know, like, oh, here we are. And so I guess in talking to the police yesterday, once again, here we have the Nortinos family. Here we have the fight and the other ones that had the blue out there. But if people don't, get involved and say something to do something, that building out there has been painted so many times with these gangs going back and forth. One came from Northern California. Sorry to say, they usually are Mexican Americans. That's just the real deal. As far as I considered myself yesterday, go back to Northern California or go back to a sanctuary city in the south where you have the Serenos. They hate each other and they want to duke it out all the time. Instead of ending up in our prisons and causing a bunch of problems in there till you have the frustration of, 2 correctional officers. I've been there. I mean, seriously, what goes on in there, people don't know. It's a bunch of evil. So one thing I would hope that people would get involved when they say something, see something, go do something, but be aware. Schools, go be aware. You start seeing kids coming to school with red sneakers, with ties and red bandanas and everything else. They're trying to tell you in a very, I would say, prideful way who they are. So anything anybody can do to take responsibility nowadays, I say go for it. And you know what, Kevin, thank you for being you and letting us get these messages out on the air, because I really feel sad for Caldwell. Brand new stadium, a baseball field away, and we have, once again, the gangs popping their evil head up.
Well, Cindy, God bless you, and we sure enjoyed all the presents for our birthday party, and I think you were the hit of the birthday party.
Well, Kevin, that hot rod. Seriously, I love NASCAR, but I could see you in that car. I was in the antique store. I'm going, oh, man, if I had money, I would get Kevin Miller to go driving around town in that hot rod.
Yes, with Tea Party Bob at my side, yes.
Well, I think actually I wanted to get him that kind of lavender purple 1950 Chevy in the back. Not that you're not as, I would say, as much of a statesman, but I kind of saw him in that. But great party, great fun, great cake, and it was just joyous. And that's what I learned when I lived in the South. You got to snatch a little joy out of life and don't let the devil and people drive you crazy.
You take care, Cindy. God bless.
I give my cares to Jesus, but thanks, Kevin. Great time. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
580-5436, 580-KIDO, and Cindy giving us the report on the gangs in Caldwell. And, of course, if you talk to any of our law enforcement, whether it's the Ada County Sheriff, whether it's the Canyon County Sheriff, they will tell you that gangs and drugs are still a big issue and will probably always be. I don't know if any of you can get this. I think it's on one of the Showtime or Cinemax, and it's this documentary called The Trade. And maybe but it's talking about the drugs and how they're coming in, and it's just crazy what our local law enforcement and our federal law enforcement have to deal with. But I digress. Our thoughts and prayers go to those officers slain in Westerville, Ohio. And really, when it comes to our men and women in the blue, what can we do to embrace them, to protect them, and to take care of them and ourselves? I'd like to hear from you next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget, Dave Petso will join us coming up next hour to talk about the markets. Woo. What a beating they took. Let's go to Pete in Mountain Home with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Kevin. Let me start by saying that the Second Amendment is a serious right for serious people, that you are justified in the use of a firearm to defend yourself. A firearm is always considered lethal force, and you are justified in using that only if you or an innocent third party is in the immediate danger of death or grave bodily harm. And that doesn't mean that somebody flipped you off on the freeway. It's the immediate danger. Now, that said, I'm 70 years old. I'm slow. I got a titanium cage holding my lower spine together, and I'm not going to run away real well. I will any chance I can get to avoid an encounter with somebody, I'm going to take it. But I think the stand your ground law is something that we need, because I don't want a prosecutor deciding, well, you could have gotten away, when he's not standing here in my body.
See, and Pete, on one hand, I gave you that example of Shirley Henson killing Gina Foster.
Oh, that was so stupid.
And,
your windows rolled up?
Right.
Now, if she had her window smashed and the other woman was reaching in, choking her,
right,
she'd have been justified.
Right.
And I will say also that as I have an enhanced concealed weapons license, and I have carried a gun every day where I could legally since the San Bernardino Muslim massacre in that county party.
Right.
People that they thought they knew. And that said, I also have paid, and I'm paying something like, I don't know, $400 a year or so for this. I have legal insurance for if I have to defend myself like that, I can call and get immediate legal representation. That's like it's a deal where there are various attorneys all over the country on retainer for that, and I also have insurance through the NRA to cover my legal costs afterward, because I will guarantee you that no matter how justified, if you get in a self-defense shooting and you injure or kill somebody, you are looking at huge legal costs. So,
you have to kill them.
Well,
and here's the deal.
Stop them.
Here's the deal on that. I know there are a lot of bleeding hearts, but I know of people that have had people break into their homes, that have tried to do them harm. They've shot them, and then the criminals civilly sue them.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that we have people here in Idaho that don't support the rights of an individual to protect themselves in with the threat of bodily harm is indescribable. Maybe we've got too many people coming in from California, and I'm not acting like a tough guy, but if someone is coming into your house and they're saying, call the police, yeah, that's a choice. You either have a gun to protect yourself, or you can wait 10, 15, 20 minutes for the police that will do their best to get there.
Oh, absolutely. And if somebody is breaking into your home when you're there, they aren't there to be nice to you. I mean, that right there, that situation in itself, they are using violence to enter an occupied dwelling, and you're supposed to try to decide, well, do they really mean to hurt me, or will they just take the TV and go? I'm sorry. I don't want to have to risk my life on their benevolence. So, yeah, I very much support the stand your ground law. But again, I'm telling people, this is serious. If you are going to carry lethal force, you had really, really better be aware of the legal ramifications involved in that, and you had better be ready to know when you're justified and when you're not justified. And just having the neighbor stand on your front lawn screaming at you that's not going to do it.
No, I totally agree with you on that. And getting back to this issue, though, that I don't know where our lawmakers are. Somebody did a story. I think they just got to town about how Guns and Ammo did a story on Idaho, and that was the spur to get the gun thing going. No, that was Greg Pruitt standing outside the Boise Gun Company with his friends launching the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance many, many years ago, and our lawmakers that are reluctant to support the Second Amendment here in the Gem State.
Which amazes me.
It does.
And particularly now we have constitutional carry, so you don't need a permit, although I tell people you ought to get one if for nothing else. When you're traveling out of state, it's kind of nice to be legal in at least many states, although not our neighbors in Oregon, Washington, or California. But if you're going to do that, you had better get yourself, if you can't afford to go get extensive training, at the very least, buy some books. Buy Massad Ayoub's book, In the Gravest Extreme. Read about what you're getting yourself into by doing that. And, the other thing that hasn't come out in the last, 20 or 30 years, we're at like 40 states now that have shall issue carry laws, where if you're a law-abiding citizen, they have to give you a carry permit. Our violent crime rate has gone down by, I think, 50%. So armed citizens do make a difference.
Well, and we go down to police being shot. We need to do something about that to protect them.
Well, and look at that. Was it Utah where an armed citizen saved a policeman's life?
Yeah.
Where the guy was beating the policeman and, shattered his eye socket, and the guy pulled over, turned around, came back and said, "Stop that or I'll shoot you," and the guy ran off, the perp. So, yeah, I really do think it's your life. I don't know how, and the other thing I see is you get people that, I don't want to own a gun because I think guns are bad. But somebody breaks in their house, guess what they're going to do? They're going to call somebody with a gun. to risk his life to protect him with a gun.
Pete, great call. Thank you.
Thank you.
6:58 traffic and weather. And Kevin Miller here reminding you, coming up next, Dave Petso. Boy, I wonder what Dave's going to say about the markets. Dave will take your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Remember, you can catch him Saturdays, 8 to 10, Money Matters on KIDO Talk Radio. We're just getting started. I want to thank everybody that attended our 50 for 50 event. Coming up, photos and videos on our website. Keep it here. Kevin Miller, Fox News next.